And to that piece of lieutenant that's always on his podcast, bashing us, yeah.
Happy 4th of July, everybody. We're live. New York's Finest Unfiltered Podcast. Most complaint cop, Eric Dim. 265 Police Live Series. John McCarry, brother, retired lieutenant, co-host to the podcast, and the founder, of course. Listen, it's Independence Day. I hope everyone's having a good time. It's 4th of July. It is the week, but I'm sure most people will be taking off. However, who will be out there? New York City police officers will be out there on the streets. Police officers throughout this entire country, they'll be out there supporting the 4th and protect you at the same time. Make sure that you're safe out there. And now that the New York City Police Department has had a one-day training course with Rener Gracie, you're fully trained, and I'm sure you'll be able to be up to the task. John, let's get right into it. I'm sure people are ready to get pissed off, or someone's going to decide with us. Let's get into it.
Yeah, first, I think we should give ourselves a little credit. So just want to back up a while back. We were talking about Jiu Jitsu. Eric's obviously a big supporter of Jiu Jitsu, as he does it every day of his life. So we were speaking about that. Eric said that Rener Gracie should become an ambassador for the NYPD. NYPD should make him an ambassador to help out in training. That was a while ago. We did that a long time ago when we were talking about the diaphragm law. We're talking about how that affects public safety and how that helped to emasculate the NYPD, and why you see cops playing pity pat with perps, and some of them appear to like where they need salad tongs in order to grab the perps. So Eric said that. We started talking about how they need training. Eric said the cops need training. They should be taking in jiu-jitsu. SBA, obviously listening to this podcast, even though they have us blocked on social media for absolutely no reason, because we never even wrote anything to them. But they have they set up a seminar with Glover Teixeira. There's only like a couple of spots available. We kind of criticized the SBA about that. Fast forward now, the police department says, all right, we're going to have this one-day training with Rener Gracie. He's going to show us this proprietary system called the WRAP system. And it's being kind of sold as it doesn't compress the diaphragm, and we could use this nationally as a safe, effective restraint method for police officers. I'm not knocking Rener Gracie. I'm not knocking any technique or any thought or any advice, but I just think it falls really short of the conversation that we were having that led up to these trainings happening.
John, you're absolutely right. Exactly what you said. First of all, I'm an avid jiu-jitsu practitioner. I love jiu-jitsu. I love all forms of martial arts. I try to take part in all different types of martial arts. It's always what piques my interest. For the past couple of years, I've been really into jiu-jitsu because ultimately jiu-jitsu works. And what's special about jiu-jitsu, I really do believe this. I said this earlier. What happens on the mats translates off the mats. And that's what's so interesting about jiu-jitsu. It is lifelike. When you're on the mats, it's about problem solving. You're put in positions where you're uncomfortable. You're put in positions where you think that people that you can't beat, you can beat. And you find out that your body can do far more than you thought it could, especially as you get older. It's a sport and a self-defense and martial art at the same time that you can do as you get older. But what's interesting about this, right? Now, Rener Gracie, listen, I'm a big fan. I think he should be the ambassador for law enforcement. But what's interesting about the SafeWrap system that he displayed to the New York City Police Department is absolutely it's effective. But who is it effective for? It's effective for two good Samaritans, not for New York City police officers, because it's not necessarily did they actually violate the diaphragm law. Because I watched the SafeWrap system, and at no point is there a chokehold being applied. There is some pressure to the diaphragm. And the reason why I say that is because the diaphragm, the law itself has been written completely vague. But what's also interesting about that is that what's the concern for the Civilian Complaint Review Board? What's the concern for New York City Mayor Eric Adams? What's the concern for people that are viewing body camera footage? Is not necessarily did you choke that person, but it's the optics. And I watched the SafeWrap system. It is so effective. I've done it myself in training. But that particular move, the optics, would get you a substantiated complaint for the Civilian Complaint Review Board and ultimately civil liability.
So we titled this podcast, "Is it legal for NYPD cops to use jiu-jitsu?" right? I think it's a great question because we've seen a lot of gaslighting. I was talking to Eric yesterday. We were talking about it, and I said, what should we title it? Should we title this episode, "Is it legal to use jiu-jitsu in New York City?" And he's like, no, because it is legal to use jiu-jitsu in New York City, because we see any time that a good Samaritan steps up and uses jiu-jitsu, not like the case of Daniel Penny, where they're actually trying to hang this guy. But we saw Roe the Show put somebody in a chokehold, choked him out, and the guy luckily survived, and he was lauded as a hero. And when that incident happened, I said, well, if that was a New York City cop, you'd be looking to prosecute him. DA Alvin Bragg would prosecute him. So there's like this huge dichotomy going on with, oh, jiu-jitsu is a great thing. But if the main portions of jiu-jitsu are used, the real foundation of jiu-jitsu, applying pressure to the diaphragm to control someone, applying chokehold, that would be deemed illegal in New York City. So I'm going to get into the diaphragm law, and after Eric goes, I'll actually read through that, what it actually states. But I think you're 100% right, Eric. The other thing I've seen about the SafeWrap system, one, again, I don't like that it's being touted as a proprietary system. Kind of great on you. You're a businessman. I'm not knocking you at all, but the use of the human body, the movement of the human body to name something, to trademark it, I get it. But to actually tout it as your own, the thing that I don't like about the thing I don't like about your system, as far as for cops, is I don't see a way that they can handcuff the perp if there's two of them. Now we don't need two. We don't need two cops. We need four cops, right? Because I don't see how where's my free hand to grab my handcuffs. This is to contain someone. It's good. I see that. I could definitely see that it could be good to restrain someone, but there's no way of getting them handcuffed with that.
Well, it's interesting. We talk about it. I love jiu-jitsu, and I think that jiu-jitsu works. It's extremely effective. But the problem, again, is exactly what you just said. Excuse me. I've watched numerous videos where we see good Samaritans save the day in New York City. And I'm like, man, that's outstanding. I love it. If I was in my plain clothes, if I was a civilian, I was a good Samaritan, it would look awesome, because jiu-jitsu does work. It's the most effective tool and resource to put someone in a position where you have custody and control, and you're not hurting them, and you're not hurting them, you're hurting yourself. But I watched these videos. I said, I remember, John, we spoke about it. I said, look at the optics of this. Excuse me. Could you imagine the same video? We saw someone wearing an NYPD uniform. They would get a substantiated complaint from the Civilian Complaint Review Board, and they would probably be charged with the diaphragm law. The unions would argue and say, no one's actually paying attention to the diaphragm law, but I'm not taking my chances because that's still on the record. Every time, I'm going to say this, every time, and John's going to read the diaphragm law, every time a New York City police officer, several police officers are in a tussle and they're wrestling and grappling a subject, they are violating the diaphragm law, because you must compress that diaphragm to get someone in custody and control every time. It doesn't say if someone's laying down. If they're pressed against the wall and you're pressing your body against theirs, you're compressing their diaphragm law. What is the diaphragm law? Because what is the diaphragm itself? It's never laid out. The diaphragm, is it from the neck to the belly? We're not exactly sure, because it also says you cannot put pressure on the back. So I didn't know that your diaphragm is on your back. I don't know the medical terms, but what I can tell you this is it's written vague, and it's written vague on purpose. But again, John and I spoke about this. Is jiu-jitsu legal in New York City? Absolutely. You're a good Samaritan and you help the police and you utilize jiu-jitsu. It's effective. You're awarded as a hero and recognized. And if anyone uses jiu-jitsu, it's extremely effective, except if you're a New York City police officer. Now it's a problem wearing that blue uniform.
100%. Listen, let me bring it up on the screen so you guys can see it too. I think I have it right here. Yeah, this is it right here. All right, so this is local law 10-181. This was added in 2020. It was actually added after Floyd, but a lot of the language around it was based upon the Eric Garner incident, where, again, I don't believe that Eric Garner was put in a chokehold. New York City Council put this into effect. They called this the chokehold bill, also known as the diaphragm law. There was a part in this that said that if you put compression to the back, either intentionally or unintentionally, that would still be considered a crime and misdemeanor. They did take that part out, but Eric is 1000% right. It is vague on purpose. And here it is. Unlawful methods of restraint. No person shall restrain an individual in a manner that restricts the flow of air or blood by compressing the windpipe, the carotid arteries on each side of the neck, or sitting, kneeling, or standing on the chest back in a manner that compresses the diaphragm in a course of effecting or attempting to effect an arrest. Penalties. Any person who violates this subdivision of this subsection shall be guilty of a misdemeanor, punishable by imprisonment not more than 1 year, or a fine of not more than $2,500. So, I mean, right then and there, this law only applies to a police officer in New York City, because you're effecting arrest, right? You're effecting an arrest. What is the diaphragm? And again, are you compressing the diaphragm when you put your body on someone? Are you compressing the diaphragm when you put your hand on them, on their side, on their back, or their chest? The way I read that, yes. The PBA argued that the law is fake. It actually did get overturned. Then on appeal, the state Supreme Court said, no, it's not vague. A police officer should be able to tell when they compress somebody's diaphragm. The thing that where I see this really utterly falls short is, I think, in common sense, the majority of people could sit here and say that cops should train jiu-jitsu. Cops should use jiu-jitsu. Cops should perform chokeholds. Cops should compress people's diaphragm. Cops should be able to control resistant perpetrators. But right here, clear as day, this law, it makes it illegal to do so in New York City.
So I just wanted the public to understand, and our viewers, it may seem that we're contradicting ourselves, right? Because I have said I'm a huge advocate for jiu-jitsu. I think that every cop should train jiu-jitsu, boxing, wrestling, some form of martial arts. And the reason why I say that is because you need to be pressure tested, especially when you're in positions, especially right now where police officers, there's precarious positions that they're being attacked. It's a new phenomenon. The police officers are being assaulted just for wearing that blue uniform, not because someone's evading suspect. So what's interesting about that, jiu-jitsu does work. Every cop, I do believe every cop should train jiu-jitsu. I think that jiu-jitsu should be part of recruit training, and it should be part of its service training. Now, here's the problem. This is the way I look at it. Rener Gracie came for a one-day seminar, and I hope that he comes more often. I hope that he does become the ambassador. I hope that he actually teaches the NYPD a program that the cops will actually train jiu-jitsu. But the problem is, when you come in to show a technique one time, you're not going to learn it. And here's my analogy. If you never knew how to ride a bicycle before, and I show you a technique, and I show you how to pull a wheelie on that bicycle, does that make sense? How could you learn how to do a wheelie, but you don't know how to actually ride a bicycle? You don't know how to balance that bike. You don't know how to have the handlebars feel. You don't know that you should lean into turns. But we're going to jump, and I'm going to teach you a wheelie. And it's the same thing with jiu-jitsu. I think it's fantastic. Rener Gracie, I love that you're teaching them a SafeWrap system. But they don't, most of them, the majority of police officers are not training jiu-jitsu. There is a small percentage that do take part in jiu-jitsu, but the average police officer right now is not taking part in a full program of jiu-jitsu. So just to get to that technique, there's a lot of steps that we have missed. We missed the fundamentals. Now, if Rener Gracie is going to produce a program that the police officers are going to train, then they could utilize, and this is what I believe they should utilize, concepts and principles in comparison to technique. It's extremely difficult to learn a technique when you only do it one time. But if he's only going to do it one time, he should teach concepts and principles. And what I say by that, the concept being, well, here's the concept of jiu-jitsu, the ideology to get the person to the ground. The reason why you want that person on the ground and not the police officer, because when they're on the ground, they cannot exert energy and kinetic energy because they're on the ground. So what also, and the principles of it, where do you normally want to place your hands in positions? Understand, you want to constantly get underhooks. You want to be in a position that's advantageous. So those are concepts and principles. But just to go right to a technique, I think is flawed because the cops don't have the foundation. The majority, there are some that do train in jiu-jitsu, but the majority don't because they just don't have the time. They're overworked. They're working constantly, or they just never took part in jiu-jitsu, never piqued their interest, and they don't understand yet that how applicable jiu-jitsu can be. But what's also important, in order to have a technique applied, we must remove this diaphragm law. Until this diaphragm law is removed, we are violating that law. We've just been lucky and fortunate that they have not charged a cop yet.
Yeah, I think the other obvious part about this wrap system, and I'm going to do the same knock, that we talked about, that immediately following the even talks about this, the NYPD restricted cops even more than the law restricted them, right? They said that you can never do this, you can't do this, you can't do that. But they never told cops what they can do. They put out this one training video and literally said, you can't compress the chest, you can't compress the back, you can't put your knee on the back, you can't put body pressure on the back, you can't put body pressure on the chest. They told cops everything that they couldn't do. And in that training video, there was a male laying on the floor, right? There was a male laying on the floor. I was like, great, how did he get that? That's an awesome training video. How did he get him on the floor? Because the Eric Garner incident didn't start on the floor. Like every other fight, it starts standing up top. How did they get him down to the floor? And again, the same with the wrap system. They just show a male on the floor. How did they get to the floor? Now that he's on the floor, great. This is a great technique while someone's on the floor. But is it a great technique? Because I could very easily compare this to the Eric Garner situation. Because again, we were trained in the seatbelt hold. Daniel Pantaleo used the seatbelt hold. It's no longer, now it's considered a chokehold in the NYPD. I don't know how that happened. I don't know how a headlock is now a chokehold, but it is. He takes Eric Garner down to the ground. Eric Garner fights with him. They get Eric Garner cuffed. They roll Eric Garner to his side to promote free breathing. As we're told, they call an ambulance. And Daniel Pantaleo seek two prosecutions against him. One by the Staten Island DA. Staten Island DA refuses to prosecute. Two by Obama's Justice Department. The Justice Department refuses to prosecute because they don't see a chokehold. They don't see anything wrong with the arrest itself. But ultimately, Daniel Pantaleo is fired. Now, I've said it before, and I think you said this also, is that if that incident happened today, Daniel Pantaleo would be in jail for the rest of his life.
Absolutely. I think it's important what you said. I want to reflect on it because it actually, what you said, John, actually reflects on the analogy that I gave, right? If I taught you how to do a wheelie on a bike, but you never rode a bike before, how do you do that wheelie? How do you get to the point that you don't know how to balance it? You don't know how to ride it. You don't know how the handlebars feel. You don't have the nomenclature. You don't have the foundation of riding a bike to actually pull a wheelie. And that's the same thing here. I do believe that all cops should train jiu-jitsu, but you need that foundation. It needs to be part of the program in service training and also recruits that come into the police academy. Jiu-jitsu should be everything should be based around jiu-jitsu for your training, but you need the foundation. You need to know how to get someone to the ground. You need to know the throws. You need to know the sweep takedown. And you can't learn a double leg takedown in one day. It's just not going to happen. For my wrestlers out there, you know exactly what I'm talking about. They spend thousands of hours to do a double leg takedown. It took me a long time till I learned how the proper double leg takedown. I would sometimes take a mat and and just constantly practice it over and over. These are skills to hone in on that you need because you need to know how to get someone to the ground. Then the foundation, the concepts and principles of where to place your hands, how to position your body, how to actually put pressure on someone with weight. Now, I can tell you this. When I train jiu-jitsu, every time I train jiu-jitsu, I'm compressing someone's diaphragm. That's how I control them. That by pressing their diaphragm, whether it's on their back or on their chest. The same thing goes for police officers. When they're in a tussle, if they're doing it properly, they're going to compress the diaphragm. Yes, we see that police officers are completely mindful, despite what the union says that, hey, don't worry about it, no one's going to be charged. But the police officers are mindful of it because I watch these videos, and sometimes when the police officers do get someone on the ground in a similar type position, their knees are their knees are adjacent to the subject, to the person of interest, and they're not on top of that person. So they're mindful of it. And that's not a good jiu-jitsu position because at that point, if you're on your knees, you're the one carrying the weight. And when you do jiu-jitsu, for my jiu-jitsu practitioners out there, and if Rener Gracie has an opportunity to do this, you want the adversary to carry a weight. And if we do that, which is proper jiu-jitsu, we would be violating the diaphragm law. And that's why I said we have to come up with a system that circumvents the diaphragm law for the police officers. And virtually what it is, it's impossible. And even though it's impossible, I still believe jiu-jitsu should be part of the program because it could save the lives of the police officers and it will minimize the damage to perpetrators and subjects in their custody and in their control.
I mean, I think that's the biggest hypocrisy of it all. Like, that's the biggest hypocrisy of it all, is because we sit here and the NYPD is actually sitting here and they're applauding Rener Gracie. And I'm applauding him too for helping out. Listen, they called upon him. They presented him with a problem. And they said, hey, come up with this system. And he came up with something. He came up with a SafeWrap system. He made a T-shirt for it, right? You know, I don't believe it's proprietary. You can name the thing whatever you'd like. At the end of the day, it's wrestling. There's names. Everyone could call a move, whatever they want. You know, the suplex, the leg drop. I could name my the leg smash. I get it, but it really, in my opinion, is just further gaslighting. Like this whole entire media spectacle is just further gaslighting, because again, if you go to take that male to the ground, police officers have zero training. Since the Eric Garner incident, police officers have not received training. New York City police officers have not received training on how to actually take someone to the ground. You know, the most effective way is to take the head and the body will follow, right? But they're not allowed to do that because, again, that will violate the portions of the of the diaphragm law of 10-181. That'll violate that clear as day. Cut off the carotid artery. And you don't need to cut off the carotid artery. You don't need to cut off the windpipe. It just needs to look like you did that, and you will be guilty of that. And that's the problem here, is we're not actually solving an issue with this. We're just, hey, forget about how they got to the ground. Don't worry about that part. This is what's going to happen when you're on the ground. And that's, listen, it's great, right? Because listen, that's how you train, right? That's how you train anything. You're going to break down little movements, right? But to sit there and sell this as this is a national safe move and this is going to somehow combat or give police officers the ability to effectively and safely arrest a perpetrator, I don't believe that's true. That this isn't a system. This is a move. This is not a proprietary system. This might be a move that you named, but it 100% is not a fighting system, because in a fighting system, we should be talking about standing on the feet, protecting yourself while you're up, going down to the ground, things of that nature. And that's what's not happening here. And I believe that if we're going to develop a system like that, we're going to need Rener Gracie and great people that are masters of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and other forms of combat sports to develop that system. The reason that the NYPD is not doing it and the reason that Rener's not doing it is because you cannot do it under this law, and no one's talking about that. Rener, in Rener's defense, he did put out a video trying to not get this law to pass. He did that years ago. He put that video out. He said, you know, he goes to I don't want to put words in his mouth, but in substance, he said that if you can't use aspects of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu to control somebody, if you can't use compression on people to control someone, basically the only options you have now are blunt force, which are worse, strikes, or even worse, going to your firearm or going to a metal pipe or whatever else other options you have. So, I mean, I still think this fails on its head, and it's just, it you know, we presented it here on this podcast, but I don't think they took a portion of what we were talking about, and they're like, yeah, look what we did. And it's like, no, we were talking about this, and you guys did this.
Well, before you put the video on, I think, well, the problem is with the police department, they're playing checkers and we're playing chess. We're looking at the long game. Now, listen, I'm a big fan of Rener Gracie. I do believe he should be the ambassador for law enforcement. Immediately when the diaphragm law was administered in New York City, and that actually became an actual law, Rener Gracie jumped all over it. And at the time, he spoke about exactly that. If you're not utilizing jiu-jitsu and putting pressure on someone to have custody control, you're forced to use blunt trauma. And I see he's trying to circumvent it. He is trying to help. However, this is something that we said on the podcast numerous times, that policing is not a one-size-fits-all. This actual particular technique, and I do agree it's not a system. I think that this technique is a technique that is part of jiu-jitsu. And what I believe about that is that it is effective, but it's not a one-size-fits-all. If you're at a 7-Eleven parking lot, it may be in Nassau County or in another state, and you're dealing with one perpetrator, and you don't have buildings above you, and you don't have large crowds, this may be something that's extremely effective getting someone in that position. Also, if you're working in an area that's more supportive of police, that is not going to utilize those optics against you, because the problem is, especially in New York City, working in a metropolis where you have large crowds, getting someone in that position with 2 police officers, you need other police officers there to control the crowd, to make sure that there's nothing above you, because you are honed in on that perpetrator, that person of interest, that subject, and all hands are tied up. All 4 hands are utilized on the 2 police officers that are holding that perpetrator in that SafeWrap system, or that SafeWrap technique that Rener Gracie mentions here. It's fantastic. Does it work? Absolutely. We're going to show the video. The problem is, it does work, Rener Gracie. I agree with you. It works. The problem is the optics. The Civilian Complaint Review Board is going to be seething through the teeth saying, oh, look, you choked him. And they don't need a specific diagnosis. They don't need a specialist, just as Rener Gracie, to say, no, he wasn't choking him. The Civilian Complaint Review Board has an extreme amount of power to change the trajectory of someone's career just based on optics. And that's why we need concepts and principles to circumvent this. But ultimately, you know what the answer is, John? We can't. If we're actually holding someone on the ground and maintaining custody, we will compress the diaphragm. Ultimately, when you practice jiu-jitsu, the ultimate goal, exactly what you said, John, where the head goes, the body goes. And also what you have to do for jiu-jitsu is about the structural body, not necessarily about musculature, but about muscular, the skeletal. We're talking about the structure. So you want to realign some or misalign someone's spine to get them in a position where they can't move. And that's by moving their head in a position that's opposite from their hips. So that's the key. The key is the hips and also the head. But in order to do that, you have to put your hands in positions that give the appearance of a potential chokehold and violating that diaphragm law. Let's get right into it.
Yeah, just real quick before I go, I just want to get this out before I forget, because I have a habit of doing this every time I do a podcast. So my friend brought up a good point about this, and he actually asked me, he said, well, so what's your main problem here? I would think any training by real martial arts expert in progress is in the right direction. The cop in question should be able to cite this training as a defense, or better yet, the department cite it as a reason to not discipline them. So here's my problem. My main problem with that, and that was the question he actually presented. The main problem right there is that here's what I'm saying about this whole system. We're going to play the video. We're going to show it to you. This whole technique, excuse me, because I'm going to say it again. This is not a system. It doesn't tell you how to get the guy to the ground. It works depending on the setting. It works depending on the circumstances. Now, when we take it from a mat in a controlled environment to what you always call a tire scenario, right, on a New York City street, can we effectively do that? I don't believe in many cases you're going to be able to effectively do that, to get on the ground, both of you, and have both your hands being used, being on your knees. I don't believe that New York City streets in a dynamic street fight, you're going to do this properly. And can the NYPD cite this as training, as a cop? No. One, this isn't part of the NYPD training, right? This was just a one-day seminar. So this system would need to be written into NYPD training manuals. Cops would need to be officially trained on the use of this system, right, for them to be able to cite that. And now that's great. Oh, we're going to do that. We're going to put that into training. Kaz Dorcher, you're watching this video. You're going to put it into training, right? You're going to put it into training. Okay. Now you take that system. You take that technique. You use that technique on New York City streets, but you modify the technique. You modify the SafeWrap system because of whatever. The situation's dynamic. You're on New York City streets. There's somebody trying to get next to you. You're trying to keep one hand free. And you modify this SafeWrap technique in any way, shape, or form. And you're a male white police officer, and the resisting subject is a male black, and he has a heart attack and he dies. Rener Gracie, the NYPD trainers, they're going to come to your trial, and they're all going to testify. You were not trained to do that. You did not properly perform that technique. And I believe that will work against you more than it'll help you.
You know what? I think this pitch is. We'll stay on this before we play the video. So let's use a comparison, right? We can use this, and I think the question from your friend is fantastic. So, brother, I just want to say thank you, and I love questions because it does spark ideas and it gives us an opportunity to give perspective based on our anecdotal experience, and also how we can reflect the future and how things are going to go. So let's compare that with the case of Sergeant Hugh Barry. Sergeant Hugh Barry was put in a very precarious position. Ultimately, he shot an elder woman that was in possession of a bat. And we've heard different opinions from people, whether that's right or wrong. But what do we know is that police officers were trained by the New York City Police Department that if someone is in possession of a bat and using it in a threatening manner, there's imminent danger. And even on an exam in the police academy, the question is shoot or don't shoot. And you know what the answer is? Shoot. Sergeant Hugh Barry did exactly what the New York City Police Department trained him to do, whether you agree with it or not. This was an elder woman. Some people believe he could have overcome the resistance. She's an elderly woman, and he could have removed that bat. But his training, and he reflected on his training, because that's what we go back to. He shot her, and that's how he was trained. And ultimately, the New York City Police Department did not say this is how we train, we as leaders, and it did not blame the training. They blamed Sergeant Hugh Barry. Sergeant Hugh Barry took the weight of that entire incident, and that was how he was trained, whether you agree with it or not. And would we be in the same position with this system right here?
I think so. And then one more point on this whole training thing, right? The same thing, and I forget the name of it, Eric, if you remember, please jump in Minneapolis with George Floyd, when he put his knee on the shoulder blade of George Floyd, when Derek Chauvin put his knee on the shoulder blade of George Floyd, and you see the picture of George Floyd like this. It was a trained technique in the Minneapolis Police Department. I forget the name of it. And we had a chief, we had training sergeants, training lieutenants, training officers sit there on a stand and testify that it was never part of his training. And he even actually had the documentation from the academy where he was trained in that move. So again, when we talk about gaslighting, when we talk about, we have a problem, but we're not really identifying the problem, we're just ignoring it, and we're coming up with these little things and saying, look what we did, we solved this problem. We really haven't, because again, let's get back to the main portion of the problem. Integrity in the NYPD, integrity in law enforcement leadership throughout all blue states and all blue cities. We need people with the utmost integrity. We need leaders that have integrity. And until we get there, none of this is going to work. Eric, I'm going to play the video after you go, but I just two questions, and I hope I don't throw you off from your thing, but I have two questions for you. Should police officers be able to use Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and should NYPD police officers be allowed to choke resisting perpetrators?
That's a great question. That's absolutely. I'm a firm believer that every police officer should train jiu-jitsu. I believe that everyone. Let's even go further back. I believe that everyone should train jiu-jitsu. I think that if everyone trained jiu-jitsu, I think that the world would be a better place, because everyone would understand how vulnerable that they actually are in a physical tussle and actually have respect for the next human being. I do believe that doing jiu-jitsu brings humility, because you understand what precarious position you can be in, and how humbling jiu-jitsu could be, because you could look at someone and say, well, they're 150 pounds. You know what? That person could wrap you up like a pretzel if they have the bottom line, there is no lucky day when you train jiu-jitsu. If someone has trained jiu-jitsu longer than you did, most likely they would get you in a position. So I do think it would make the world a better place. But for New York City police officers, absolutely, they should be trained jiu-jitsu on a constant basis to be pressure tested, to understand what it feels like when someone puts their hands on you. And chokeholds should not be banned. I think it's 300 to 500,000 people a year. 300 to 500,000 people a year get choked out and no one dies doing jiu-jitsu because they apply it properly. But New York City is in complete opposition to this, and they're handcuffing the police from doing their job. Chokeholds would actually be safer. And John, let's play the video. I appreciate it.
Here at the New York Police Department, very excited to introduce the SafeWrap system, a proprietary system of 2-on-1 restraint that enables any two officers to subdue a single subject in a way that is safe for the subject and safe for the officers. With the SafeWrap system, the subject cannot escape. They can't punch, bite, kick, or scratch. They cannot grab a weapon because we have full control of their hands, and it easily transitions into handcuffing without ever putting the person's face into the pavement. So it's much more humane. All of this is being done from the recovery position. So it's good for the subject, it's good for the officers, and it's the best thing for the community. And that's what this is all about. De-escalation all the way with the SafeWrap system.
What do you think?
Well, I tell you, I always say I think he should be the ambassador of the police department. I think that he legitimately, I think this is twofold. He legitimately wants to help. At the same time, I think that he's a fantastic businessman. I even heard some of the key words that he used, that this is a great system, keeps the police officer safe, keeps the person in custody safe. It's de-escalation. So he's using keywords, buzzwords. I think that he's really, I think he has a great mind for business and understands what people want. He is mending the community and police together in a business fashion. I think that he's extremely intelligent as far as catching the eye of people, using those keywords, de-escalation. The problem is New York City Council, most of them, especially like Golden Girls girl herself, they don't understand what it is to be in a tussle. Most of these people have never been in a fight themselves. That how do you get there? And that there will be some violence involved in a tussle until you get to this point. Absolutely. Yes, this is a fantastic technique, but you have a lot of steps until you get to this point. That's why we need to train. We can't just get on a bicycle and pull a wheelie. We need to know how to ride the bike. And the same thing for the police officers. They need to know the fundamentals and the concepts and principles of jiu-jitsu, grappling, before we get to an actual technique.
I mean, again, I'm going to go back. You're on the floor already. How did we get there? How did we get here? And I'm looking at this technique, and I'm telling you right now, I'm speaking from somebody from, I won't even put myself as a novice in jiu-jitsu. I'll put myself as like less than a beginner. I don't even know what I could call myself in that aspect of jiu-jitsu. But I'm looking at this, and I'll tell you right now, you show me this one time, I won't be able to perform this on the street. I don't even know what they're doing. And that's my other issue is that if this does get implemented into NYPD training, how often will it be? Will it be one time in the academy? Or will it even get into the coveted position of the NYPD, which is one time a year? And if it's both of those things or only one of those things, it's not even close enough for someone to be able to effectively use that on New York City streets. Because Eric, you train. I train other forms of martial arts, working out. You need to repetition. And watching this one time, it's great. Listen, I think it's great. You got a day with Rener Gracie. You got a day with Glover Teixeira for the SBA. I think all these things are nice things. They're nice things for the cops, the decompression strategy, the team building of events. They're good. But it's really just nothing. It's really basically like if we just got together and played a video game that day. It's the same thing. It's literally, we could have got together. We could have went on Kaz's private Call of Duty group and had a team building day that day too, because that's what this is more than this is an effective technique. And
I haven't been invited yet.
I really just got to call it what it is. It's gaslighting. Not knocking Rener Gracie. I don't know if he's making money. I don't know if he got a contract with New York City. I'm not going to sit here and speculate whether he did or he didn't. It doesn't really matter to me. For the time he put out to come out, he should be paid for it, right? He should be, and he should get paid even more to come in and actually help to develop a actual strategy, an actual system for cops to use to effectively arrest people. And again, I don't see this being effective. There's a lot of portions of that video that I could dissect, and I don't like it.
Speaking of Kaz Daughtry, we haven't been invited yet for a Call of Duty battle. We're in. Just invite us. Send the invite over. www.finest. CRT took it all up. But you know what? You're spot on, brother. I have to say, for all the jiu-jitsu practitioners out there that are watching this, you know exactly what I'm talking about. When you're sitting in an academy or in a class and the professor, the instructor is showing a technique, sometimes, John, they show a technique and like, okay, go. And you go to do the repetitions to drill it. And you go, wait a minute. What did he just show us? He literally just showed it to me 2 seconds ago, and I already have no idea what to do. And I'm training. So, yeah, these are things that you have to build into your neural pathways. And how do you build techniques and concepts and principles into your neural pathways? By doing it over and over and over. That's why New York City police officers, veteran police officers, should do the job better than rookies. And over time, you get paid more because you're doing it on a constant basis. It's in your neural pathways. Repetition. You need practice. Yes, if there's something that they're going to do every day, I support it. But I don't think we should default just to one technique. Again, I think we need to go back to concepts and principles. How do you get the concepts and principles? Jiu-jitsu needs to be part of the program, training, and as soon as you get on the job in recruitment and also in service training. We need those concepts and principles. They have to be trained on a constant basis.
Police work is a contact sport. Doesn't look pretty on camera, and we'll keep beating that into people's heads, and that's really what we're missing when we, but we'll even do it too. We'll throw the buzzwords out there, de-escalation, whatever the terms are that for this month or that day, just to try to bring the conversation together, and we could find some common points. But I think the point overall, what we're all missing is police work's an ugly thing that you see. Street fights are dynamic, and that's exactly what you do as a cop. I always said they give you this stupid 8-point cap and a tie, and they're like, "Oh yeah, go out in the street and fight with everybody," and that's really what you do. You're going out there and you're getting into street fights, and nobody really wants to acknowledge that fact. No, like the politicians, the NYPD today, the inept leadership, they refuse to acknowledge the fact that every day, hundreds of times a day, police officers are being called to situations that violence will be deployed. And violence is an ugly thing, regardless if you're wearing a uniform or you're a good person or whatever that may look like. Sometimes when you see somebody do something violent to stop a situation from further escalating, it looks terrible. You look at that person like, oh my God, that guy's an animal. Really? But are they? And that's where we need to get. We need to really get back to the truth. This law is absolutely ridiculous. The training in the NYPD is in shambles. This is a great thing. So as much as I sat here and the fact that we're even talking about this is a great thing. The fact that Rener Gracie showed up, that UFC legend showed up, these are great things. It's starting the conversation, but there's so much that needs to be done. This is basically like in the text message mode. Hey, do you think this would be a good idea? Yeah, I think this would be a good idea. But we need to get back. We need to get to start to telling the truth and be able to tell the truth to our elected officials. This doesn't work. We need this repealed. End of story. We're going to keep honing in on this until something happens. We need laws. We need common sense. We need to give police officers the ability to effectively and properly be police officers. And when they step out of that, then you go after them.
Absolutely. I'd love to invite Rener Gracie on this podcast. I'd love to have a good conversation, a roundtable, and talk about concepts, principles, techniques that police officers can utilize. Build a program. I do believe Rener Gracie should be the ambassador for law enforcement throughout this country. Rener Gracie, come on this podcast, New York's Finest Unfiltered podcast. Please, if you have an opportunity to see this, I'm sure maybe some of the police officers will see it. This will be out in the jiu-jitsu world. Come on this podcast. Let's have a roundtable. Let's talk about a program that can work. Let's go to New York City Council together. Please, I'm asking you to go to New York City Council with us. John and I will go. Let's testify to New York City Council that no matter what position the police officer in, they are violating that diaphragm law, and they cannot keep the public safe. Let's work together to make a program for the police officers, keep them safe, and keep them safe from this law, and also keep New York City residents safe from this law, because it handicaps police officers for doing their job. Rener Gracie, I want to thank you and your family for your contribution, what you've done for the world with Jiu Jitsu. You have changed lives. You've changed the sport. You've contributed to the UFC. You are the face of Jiu Jitsu. Thank you so much for trying to help law enforcement. Come on the show. Let's work together. We can give you our experience as police officers to positions, what happens as a police officer, and how we could transition jiu-jitsu into it and build a program that's not only for New York City, but for the entire country.
I love it. I mean, and I think that's ultimately the system that the NYPD needs. They need to develop a system not for someone like you, Eric, not for a trained individual. They need to develop a system for someone more like me, who's a novice in all different aspects. And really, how do you get this person physically in shape, novice as far as jiu-jitsu? How do you get this person to be able to effectively and safely bring someone down to the ground? And again, like I said, unfortunately, sometimes to safely and effectively stop a resisting perpetrator, violence is going to be deployed, and sometimes it's going to look okay, and sometimes it's really not, and sometimes you're even going to need to step it up. So I think we need to get back to truth. This is what this podcast is about. Thank you for the NYPD for continuing to take our consulting advice, but please don't just take a portion of it. Look at the big picture, and then really let's get back to a basis of reality, society, and a societal norm of what we expect for a New York City police officer. Matt Walsh did a documentary. What is a woman? Me and Eric are going to do a documentary. What is a police officer? Because right now, no one has any idea. And so I think with that, I will begin to wrap this up. And, big shout out to Rener Gracie for taking his time out, going to the NYPD. Big shout out to all you guys that are training, that are lifting, that are doing all those things. But I'll tell you, it's scary watching you guys go out on the street, because I'm afraid every time I see a video, because it's I don't know how the political winds are going to go. When the political winds are going to go, this embarrassment of a leadership team, either they ignore or they demonize. It's one or the other.
Last thing I want to leave with this. So John and I have received an extreme amount of hate mail, and we've even lost followers and subscribers in response to our perspective of the termination of police officer Kimberly Lucas for lying to the police department and also producing 2 fake vaccine cards. We received an extreme amount of opposition. We even referred to as rats. And I can tell you this. We don't care. I don't care about the followers. We don't care about the subscribers. If you don't like what we're saying, don't listen, don't watch. If you want to live in a bubble and you want to pretend that lying in an official investigation and also producing 2 fake vaccine cards is appropriate, while other police officers lost their job because they told the truth, and while other police officers right now are facing 75, 90 vacation days, just like Lucas, for being in situations, for doing their job, not for off-duty conduct, for doing their job, and yet you find that this is okay. Frankly, I don't care. You don't want to follow us? You don't want to listen to us? I don't give a fuck. Take care.
Couldn't agree more. My Friday, I lost 400 followers yesterday. And people were sending me nasty messages. I'm like, I could care less. I was posting my thoughts a year ago, and I didn't have one like. Why do I? And I didn't have any followers. Why do I care? I was like, okay, don't follow me. I was like, I think the main thing that we're doing here is we're just starting a conversation, and the parts of that conversation. Listen, if you're sitting here and you're agreeing with everything that I'm saying or everything that Eric's saying, or we're always agreeing with each other, there's something wrong. You need to get your own opinions. Like, because we're supposed to not agree on things. But on this scenario, I think we're 100% right. You got Marlon Bethel. He's terminated. This girl is being rewarded. 85 days. the equivalent of like $30,000 to $35,000. I would have gladly paid a $35,000 fine to continue my career. I would have paid a $100,000 fine to continue my career. We took 85 days from her. Sorry. So then reinstate everybody. If it's not a big deal, you should all be saying guys like Marlon should be reinstated. Let's get back to Lieutenant Macari. Let's get back all these guys. And if it's not a big deal, then it shouldn't be a big deal. Then nobody should be affected by it. So, the things we're saying, they're unfriendly. They're politically unfriendly. This is why this show should really be called The Things We're Not Allowed to Talk About podcast, because that's what we talk about. And we're going to touch some nerves. I'm sure this is going to touch some nerves. And like always, if you didn't agree with anything we said, let us know. We'll bring it up. We'll address it. You want to come on and give your points. It's an open conversation. It's an open platform. This is what we do. So, thanks for everyone that sticks with us, whether you agree with us or not. That's it. You done? No more?
I thought your battery was going.
It is. It's going.
I know your battery's going. No, seriously, thank you, everyone, for New York's Finest Unfiltered podcast. Thank you so much for watching us. And I agree, John. I want to reflect on what you said. Absolutely. I think that we should all have mutual conversations, and it should be stoic and professional. And if there's things that, even for our fans out there, if there's things that you don't agree with us, I think it's great for conversation. Please give us feedback. We're always open to opposition, and I'm always open to criticism. If there's something I say you don't like, or vice versa with John, please tell us. Listen, we try to become better human beings every day. At the same token, I really don't care what people think about me. John doesn't care either. You shouldn't care what people think about you also. I live by this. What people think of you is none of your business. Keep trucking. Thank you.
That's it. Eric Adams for prison 2024. And Eric Adams, he's pretending to get stuff done since January 2021.
Law enforcement professionals dedicate their lives to serving and protecting our community. But who's protecting their financial futures? That's where Laidlaw Blue comes in. Our wealth management platform is specifically designed for the law enforcement community. Laidlaw Blue is a division within Laidlaw Wealth Management, run by retired New York City detective John McDermott. His status as a retired detective uniquely positions him to establish a deep connection between Laidlaw Blue and the law enforcement community. Our platform is easy to use and provides a range of financial services, including investment management, retirement planning, and insurance solutions. With Laidlaw Blue, you can secure your financial future and provide for your loved ones. Our team of experienced financial advisors understands the unique challenges and opportunities that law enforcement professionals face. We're here to help you navigate the complexities of financial planning and achieve your goals. Laidlaw Blue. Secure your financial future today. Book a meeting using the QR code displayed or call us directly on 888 901 Blue. That's 888 901 Blue.